It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
So earlier today, Pennsylvania Department of Education Executive Deputy Secretary Angela Fitterer, she visited a nearby elementary school to thank the educators for their hard work and dedication ahead of the National Teacher Appreciation Week. And she had to say, she said, educators play a critical role in helping to inspire and nurture our children who will be important leaders in the future of the Commonwealth. And my mind went to this place of going, you know, it's a far cry than what we hear in other states, where, you know, teachers are not only not being thanked or appreciated or honored, but they're actually the target. So it's good to see that the Shapiro administration here in Pennsylvania valuing educators. But again, this attack on education, this attack on teachers, this is real and it's growing even in my backyard. And here to share some thoughts on just how dangerous and how bad this can be, I've asked Randy Weingarten to come talk with us. Randy is the president of AFT, the American Federation of Teachers. Randy, thanks for taking time for us.
It's my pleasure.
So I got to start with the first thing. New York Times Magazine has you as how does the title go? The most dangerous person in the world. That's the title of their article.
Well, the magazine, frankly, what the magazine does is it narrates what's happening in America now through the eyes of the right wing. And they have every right to do that. They just should have said that that's what they were doing. And what has happened is the guy who said that, Mike Pompeo, did it for political reasons, called what teachers teach filth, and, he couldn't get any traction on it. Just like, what we saw in Chicago, where you had Brandon Johnson, who when he started in the polls was at about 2%, running against a privatizer and someone who was paid for, who got lots of political contributions from the Betsy DeVos, side of the Republican Party. And, Brandon Johnson, who believes in public education and believes that all kids should have the resources to thrive, he won in Chicago. So, what we're seeing is that people really want their kids to be okay. Yeah. And they want their kids to get a decent education. And frankly, they don't want these culture wars, and they don't want this divide. But yet what you're seeing is that the dividers and the privatizers, they're trying to recreate each and every day more anger. So they go and, smear and scapegoat, which is what they did in the New York Times Magazine and what they did last week in hauling me in for 3 hours of testimony and subjecting me to long statements without being able to answer a question.
Yeah, there was no testimony, though. That was just a public lashing. But here's the thing. Yeah. I mean, obviously, you're now the face of or being made the face of the shutdowns that happened, and you're being targeted as the person responsible for all of the stuff that people are angry about. And look, there's an awful lot of Monday morning quarterbacking going on here, because I do remember what 2020 was like. I do remember we didn't know what how things were going to play out. So I do find it interesting that these people now are trying to rewrite what went on in 2020 right. When Trump was president. You guys actually had a plan to keep schools open. You guys actually had a way forward. It's just nobody wanted to listen.
Exactly right. I mean, I shouldn't say that. There were
nobody in the administration wanted to listen.
Yeah. I mean, we were the first ones. This is what the irony is here. And this is why they don't have any proof of what they're saying, So they're just smearing and scapegoating. But the truth is, we did have a plan from April 2020. No one really knew what was going on. Everybody was fearful. If we knew then what we know now, we would have done a lot more like what they did in Europe, which was schools would have been the priority, not the economy. And there would have been basic mitigations in schools, including good ventilation and ultimately testing and then vaccines, so that people would have been safe. Because after that first wave, the variants were not as deadly and lethal, even though over 1 million people died in America. And frankly, 245,000 kids were orphaned. So but this is what is more amazing to me than their revisiting of history, and ignoring the fact that we had a plan, but our plan was open safely. What is happening right now is the same group of people, when we should be focusing on how we help kids right now. If you believe that there were all these problems that emanated from the pandemic, then the responsibility should be how we help kids now. And these same exact people are trying to cut budgets and trying to cut money for helping kids with loneliness, and trying to cut money for helping kids with learning loss, and trying to cut funding for helping make sure that schools are, have the resources that they need to help kids thrive. So the hypocrisy here is really unbelievable. But what I care about is that they're trying to deepen a divide in America rather than solve the problem we have to solve for, which is how we make sure our kids have a welcoming and safe environment and help them regain confidence and overcome loneliness and leap ahead academically. That's what teachers are trying to do, even in the midst of this culture war. That's why we try to give out books, 1.5 million already, when they are banning books. That's why we try to teach honest history when they are trying to hector us. That's why we are focused on things like community schools and experiential learning, because even with this demagoguing, we want to help our kids thrive. Yes. We are not afraid of knowledge. Knowledge is empowering. I don't know why they are afraid of knowledge or actually making sure all kids thrive.
See, I think you've got it all wrong here. I think you think that they actually care about kids and they care about education. They care about money. The thing that's always interesting to me is it's Education Incorporated cares about money, and destroying the public schools, my local public school, destroying that and defunding it, that seems to be the plan. And you talk to some of these groups that are now propping up, these Moms for Liberties groups that are trying to take over school boards. It's all about restraining. It's all about banning. It's all about, anything but educating my kids.
Well, that's one of the things that they try to do. They just try to fear and smear. And our members, educators around the country, and frankly, most parents, we are together trying to help kids learn. I love that this group called Parents Together, it's an online parent group that represents about 3 million parents. They were so offended by what happened last week. They put out an email to all of their members about what a sham hearing it is. And frankly, they represent a whole lot more people than this group that Betsy DeVos has funded.
Yeah, I do want to get your thoughts on that hearing last week with the House Oversight Committee, the subcommittee hearing on school closures, and I watched it, and I'm going, this isn't a hearing. This is an attempt to publicly shame. This is an attempt to rewrite history. There was no give and take. I mean, how do you sit there? I guess this is my question, because I think I would struggle with it. How do you sit there and have people say horrible things about you, call you all kinds of names, and then are told you can't respond? I don't know how you do that.
Look, I think that this is part of the reason why I would hope that anyone who watched that hearing saw that, how not, how inappropriate it was. I believe in government and democracy, Rick. And so even though I knew it was going to be unfair, I thought, unlike all those Trump appointees who refused to testify before Congress, I felt an obligation as an American, as someone who was engaged in this, to testify. And what was interesting to me is that they wanted to make it a showboat, and they didn't want to hear me. They didn't want to hear all the different times we tried to open schools safely, and the Trump administration refused to act and refused to do that. They thought the teachers were dispensable, and they, didn't care. And you could hear that in the questions that some of the Republicans asked. What I thought was really fascinating was at the end of the hearing, the chair of the committee says to me, I don't disagree with the 2 changes that the CDC made upon your request. I don't disagree. The issue is just process. To which I then said to myself, so Americans who are involved in schools shouldn't be able to talk to the CDC for half an hour to actually make sure we reopen schools safely? And because we did, and because they put out what they put out, and Biden put out what he put out, we went from 46% of the schools open in January 2021 to 97% of them open in May 2021. I mean, so even though you could see they didn't want to hear me because they didn't want to hear the truth.
Yeah. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show with Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers, AFT.org, the website. And I want to clarify that for a second, because a lot of the stuff that you got done, you had proposed to the Trump administration earlier.
Yes. We had proposed this.
It's not you who did this. It was the people in power. You were advocating to make sure that that kids had an opportunity to go back to school. It was the Trump administration that stopped this.
It's even worse than that, Rick, because the Trump administration refused to talk to us. And you had to see the chairman's face when I said, well, the only commission I actually sat on was the Cuomo Commission. I sat on that, his reopening commission. We actually put a paper out in, I think it was June or July. Virtually every school in New York State was reopened. And he said, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, you didn't ask me about that. I'll give you those documents. So the people like Governor Cuomo, who tried to figure out both how to reopen schools and keep them safe, and they just didn't want to hear it. Yeah. But DeVos and Trump refused to talk to teachers or to our union or to anyone to actually problem solve what they said they wanted to do. And even now, there's a new COVID study that says if you had done that, like Europe did, you would have had more schools open, because we would have been able to meet the fear with facts, which is what we needed to do.
Yeah, but here's the thing. And
we wanted schools open for kids. We knew it was important, but we needed to keep it safe for the people who teach them and for the kids themselves, since 245,000 children were orphaned by COVID.
But it's this you said, the facts, and during the Trump years, we came up with these alternative fact stuff. Now you listen to, depending on which hat people are wearing, they've got their own set of reality and their own set of facts. If I'm hearing what you're saying, had we gone in the direction that you wanted to do, things would have been better. We just had a Trump administration hell bent on not. I want to make sure I get that clear, because all I'm hearing, Randy, is it was you. You personally closed the schools. You personally made our kids dumb. You personally did all this. It was you, the most dangerous woman in the world, not just here,
it's just,
but the world.
Rick, if I had one millionth of the power that they attribute to me, I would hope that I would use it a whole lot better than they do.
So let me ask you this, because you mentioned it a bit ago, anti-intellectualism. It seems to be a badge of courage today.
Anti-knowledge. I would not say intellectualism.
Okay, anti-knowledge. Well, however you want to frame this. My grandfather used to joke, if he doesn't know it, it isn't worth knowing. Now, he was being facetious in this. I believe there are people who have now taken that as their core ethos. If they don't actually know it, then it doesn't exist and it doesn't matter, and it's got to be made up in a lie. How did we get here?
Well, fear is a great motivator. And I think what has happened is, Trump and his ilk are very good at creating fear in a situation where we've had a huge, globalization, the technology. We saw jobs disappear from the middle of the country, from the Northeast. We've seen, unions get decimated. I mean, it's not as if the last 20 or 30 or 40 years were good for the middle class. And so you see a lot of anxiety. And then on top of that, you have COVID, which created a lot of anxiety. And so you either try to solve those problems or you exacerbate those problems. And what is happening right now is that the MAGA world leans on the leadership, not the workers, not the people, but the leadership tries to stoke fear. That's what Trump did.
Yeah.
That's what they do. And we as teachers, we try to instill hope and aspiration. And knowledge, the power of knowledge is the power of aspiration.
So
the power of knowledge is the power of hope. It's the power of being able to navigate the world. It's not the only thing one needs. One needs to be able to eat, to have a home or roof over your head. But knowledge is agency. And what's really one of the things that are so disturbing about this culture war, just like what happened with Darwinism and the Scopes trial, is that it's anti-knowledge. It is trying to shield children from knowledge. And I put my bet with kids that when they know what the real deal is in the world, it's going to be a better world. It's going to be a kinder world. It's going to be a more diverse world. It's going to be a world where we're solving problems. And there's a fear of that. And you see that in this banning of books and this not wanting kids to know each other's history. It's an attempt to shield from the future. And you can't shield from the future. We need to seize the future.
I'm with you. I know, because I got to be honest. I learned about book bannings and how they used to burn records and book burnings and all this stuff. And you go, what were these crazy people thinking in the past? Sadly, we're in this moment. So, last question I've got for you. Given everything we've talked about, how do we move this forward? I mean, the right wing message machine is powerful. The echo chamber is incredibly influential. How do we get reality out in this world?
Because poll after poll, look, not even polls. For the last 2 years, I think I've been to 147 schools in the last 2 years. The dominant feeling in this country when it comes to education and when it comes to labor is we want our kids to learn and thrive, and we want to have agency and power at work, and workers have to have a share of the economic pie. And so that's where voting becomes important. That's where engagement becomes important, because the real problem here is the bullying is to try to silence me, try to silence others. And apathy and bullying are the tools of the autocrat. So the more they bully, the more they try to smear and scapegoat, the louder I'm going to be the more engaged I'm going to be in the fight to defend public education, in the fight to strengthen public education, in the fight to strengthen our country. A great nation is not afraid of knowledge. A great nation is not afraid of books. A great nation cares about its kids. So they want to bully me? That is just making me more determined and my members more determined to help our kids and our country thrive.
Well, good on you, Randy. I appreciate the work that you do. I appreciate the work that teachers do. And look, the teachers that taught my kids during the pandemic, I give them nothing but credit for the work that they did. I look forward to talking to you again, and keep up the fight.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Randy Weingarten, president of AFT, the American Federation of Teachers. Now, there's a bumper sticker. Let's take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people on the talk.
I will be retiring the name Crooked from Hillary Clinton so that we can use the name for Joe Biden. You would think that Hillary would be very happy today. She's out there someplace celebrating.
My name is Mike. I'm from Merrimack, New Hampshire, and I'm here to see my favorite president in the whole world, Donald Trump.
They actually said we would melt children's bones. We would bring asthma.
Democracy dies in darkness.
President Trump never shies away from a debate, and he did very well.
And even the Democrats say it was one of the most successful presidencies.
Journalists turn into sheep.
And if you want to have a gas stove, you're going to be able to have a gas stove.
I mean, if you know what this shirt means,
What is this shirt?
Q is it's a mix of different things.
I believe that we've got to do everything we can to make sure we have more abortions.
But after the election, once Biden won, because of his massive fraud,
quote, deplatforming works.
No, none of all that's BS. No, totally BS. Yep. Who said that?
Trump is still the president right now. He is running a shadow presidency, possibly from Mar-a-Lago.
Gender affirmation surgery and insanity.
In rural areas, you see a higher teen mom rate because we value life.
Where are the feminists? And how is it that Donald Trump Jr. is a leading feminist?
2 ounces, just 2 ounces is equivalent to 3 joints.
Biden, the real Joe Biden that was with Obama when he was vice president with Obama, he's been executed.
My support of Donald Trump is unwavering. I would take a bullet for the man.
Imagine if it was Don Jr. smoking crack with prostitutes.
Our terrorist enemies hate homosexuals more than we do. They're the ones who discriminate.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
I'm not kidding.
As I said, there's a bumper sticker. A great nation is not afraid of knowledge. I wish there was a political party that actually believed that. And you look again what they're doing. It's all about holding us hostage, holding education hostage. And I look at the Donald Trump campaign video that was just released, where he outlines his grand scheme, the grand plan to go after colleges and universities, their endowments. If they have the audacity, if they're one of those people practicing affirmative action, we're going to go and steal their money. Good luck on that. Let's see how that works. Let's see how it works itself out. But again, it's this kind of every grievance that you hear on right-wing radio, that you hear on the F channel, is now turning into policy. It really is, and it's quite frightening when you stop and think about the world that they want to recreate. Because all you got to do is look back to where we came from. We're going to make America great again. I argue we are a great country. Or we used to be, because we used to believe in those principles of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. That you have the right to do whatever it is you want to do as long as your right doesn't infringe on mine. And that's always been my belief. I may not agree with what you do. I may not like what you do. You want to be around you when you do what you do. But as long as it doesn't infringe on my right to lead my life, you do it. You pursue your happiness. And if we were that country, when I grew up as a kid, that worried about themselves and worried about their families more than what people that they don't even know are doing, I think we'd be much better off. And maybe if we invested in education instead of threatening to steal endowments. Now, I'd be in favor of going, we're going to make those endowments pay for people's education. I could go with you on that, but just snatching it away, no, not there. Quick break, right back.
The old factory towns in America's heartland have been taking a beating. Thing is, though, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And after years of politicians talking about it, they finally passed a big new infrastructure package to rebuild roads and bridges, fix drinking water systems, and make the energy grid more secure. We're finally turning things around after 40 years of screwing over working people. But will we keep moving in the right direction? That's our choice as Americans.
We are AFGE. We support our nation's military and our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders and provide services to our nation's seniors. Across the country and here in Washington, D.C., the American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Before we close the program, we want to take a moment to thank our viewers and to share a little bit about why we do what we do. At the Rick Smith Show, we believe that media today is almost entirely controlled by corporate greed. So we have now 24-hour news channels. But instead of 24 hours of news, what we get is 1 hour repeated 24 times, and with tons of commercials creating obscene amounts of profits. Information once presented as a public service has now become a private commodity. So when lies make money, lies are what we get. We get a corporate-controlled rage machine feeding us anger and hate, trying to convince us that our problems are right-left or red-blue, when they are and always have been up-down, the wealthiest 1% versus the rest of us. Our goal is to be an alternative to that machine, not as a news show with a fancy journalist out front, but as a talk show run by a union truck driver and a team of working-class heroes just like you. Everything we do, both what we get right and what we get wrong, is dedicated to advancing the interests of America's working families. No corporate ad buys, no think tanks, no focus groups, no talking points. We are media by working people, for working people. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.